Hi, Fran here again. Recently, I've been asked about lessons that I've learned about myself as a leader across the years. So I thought I'd put together a little list. I've come up with 9 things in particular that I've learned about myself. Some of them not so pleasant, but let me share some of those with you. So the first thing that comes to mind is that, for me anyway, there is no one size fits all way of doing leadership in terms of trying to get it all right. There just isn't any one size fits all recipe. It's all about experimentation and working out what works best for you. So the second thing that I've learned across the years is I need to be completely clear about what it is that I want. What is my overall vision? And whether that's applying to a company or to a product or an implementation of a process, if I wasn't 100% clear, if I hadn't, as Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind, if I hadn't created completely, thoroughly, and totally what that end vision was, then how could I expect anybody else to be clear and to come along with me on that journey? Also learned that conveying that with passion was also really important. So the third thing is about being willing to send messages over and over and over again to all of my team members. Just because I have something in my mind or I'm clear on what needs to be done, doesn't mean that my team members are going to be clear the first time they get a message, the second time they get a message, or the third. And the parallel that I like to think about there is if we were talking to young children, if you have a child or you've been around young children as they're learning things, would you have any imagination that you could say something once and they just simply get it forever and ever and ever? No. So why would we think adults are any different, really? So I think good leaders need to learn to be willing, anyway, to say things over and over and over again. That leads me to the next thing, and that is, if I'm going to make an error with regard to communication in any particular way, I want to err on the side of over communication rather than under communication. Neither is good, but I would rather over communicate to ensure people really get a message and again be willing to say things. The next item on my list was about fine lines. And over the years, I have discovered that there are fine lines between things, and over and under communication is one of those fine lines. Just when you think you've got it exactly right, have you really quite hit the mark? Under communication, and people are going to accuse you of never being told anything. Over communication, and they're going to say, you're micromanaging me, or do you think I'm an idiot? Right? So there is a fine line between those things. Again, if I'm going to make an error, I am going to err on the side of over communication, because I can certainly apologize and say, oh my goodness, I would never imagine calling anybody an idiot. So I just wanted to make sure everybody had that message. Another fine line is about vulnerability versus strength. And this is a really interesting one for me. I've learned that I need to show some level of vulnerability or be willing to be vulnerable with people that I'm leading, because that helps them to understand I'm human just the same way they are. At the same time, if I am, I guess I'll use the term over vulnerable, and I'm not showing enough strength, especially in times when I'm feeling uncertain, if I allow that to come across too much, I find that it really worries people, and they might very well lose faith in me as a leader. So there's a fine line. There's also a fine line between micromanagement and absenteeism. So even though this one may sound as though there's a giant distance between being there too much and not being there at all, the distance between those, in reality, I have found is a very, very narrow margin. So if I'm going to make a mistake, I think I would rather make the mistake slightly towards micromanagement. I want to make sure, though, that I am allowing people to do their roles, but to not be there. Probably one of the most painful lessons that I've ever learned about that was being absent, even though my team said, no, we don't need you here, and we're going to do a better job without you. We're going to show you that it's okay for you to walk away. I've certainly learned that being absent and out of communication for too long a period of time really doesn't work very well either. Another fine line that I've learned about is the issue of command and control versus empowerment. So while I don't like the idea of the command and control environment, do as I say, only as I say, don't think, don't act until you're told, don't speak unless spoken to, there are some times when you're the person in charge and you do need to step in and control a situation so that it doesn't get out of hand. The goal, of course, I think anyway, is to empower people as fully as we can. But there are some people who don't want to be empowered. In fact, they prefer to be controlled. And I guess that's probably a pretty tough way to put it, but they do want to be told exactly what to do. Some people are frightened of making decisions. There's also a fine line between having compassion for a person's situation and also requiring performance. So we want to give people the ability to have flex in what they do and understand that their situations may be impacting them negatively and give them space to be able to move through the journey. But at the same time, if I have people that learn that I'm going to be very compassionate if they expose a situation to me, is it a possibility that they will start to take advantage of those circumstances? So again, it's a bit of a fine line. Another lesson that I've learned, and I would say this is going to be number 6, is to be wary of the "I don't need" types of statements coming from people. And what I mean by that is people who say to me, Fran, I don't need your support. I don't need help with things. Just tell me what you want me to do. Let me know if there are any boundaries around that, and then let me go about getting it done. I don't need help. What I have learned over the years is to completely buy into that ends up with people saying, well, you're not giving me clear direction. So I think that is, again, probably another fine line. Being wary of people saying, I don't need positive feedback, because I think you're just trying to blow sunshine up my shorts or something. You're being too positive. I don't need positive feedback. Just tell me how it is. Tell me what you want me to correct. I am very capable of knowing that I do a great job anyway. I've heard lots of people tell me that, and I've tried to follow what they're saying to show I do believe you, I do believe what you're saying, only to then be accused of never giving compliments, those kinds of things. And it wasn't about credit where credit is due. It's not that. It's about giving people positive feedback and telling people they're doing a terrific job, or they're doing a good job, or what they have done is correct and appropriate. If there isn't enough of that, then I believe, my experience anyway, is there is a likelihood that you will be accused of never talking to people unless you're telling them what they're doing wrong. The I don't need recognition. Again, I've heard lots of people say that, and I've come to understand I don't think it's really the case. I do think people need recognition. The question is, recognition how and where? How publicly? How privately? So can I send certificates? Can I give pats on the back? Those sorts of things. So for me, it's more about learning about the individual and what they're trying to tell me with the I don't need recognition. I think everybody needs recognition. Everybody needs positive feedback. It's just learning the individual and how it gets through to them. I don't need direction. Just tell me the end outcome and then leave me on my own to get there. Well, I have heard quite a few people tell me that as well. And what that ended up in is sometimes a going back and forth of saying, if I don't lay down some boundaries or tell you where the edges are, you might start exploring in some ways that are not going to work, or things that we don't have budget for, that kind of thing. So if I am not setting that direction right at the beginning, it's possible that some people are going to come back and say, stop giving me direction. I've worked out that I really do need to give direction in places where there is risk. If there's risk and I'm not giving the direction, then people will end up telling me, oh, it's your fault anyway, Fran, you should have told me that before I got started. So I would be wary of that. I would also be wary of people saying, I don't need breaks, I don't need time off, I don't need vacation. Everybody needs to recharge their batteries, and sometimes I find that it's their own ego that's trying to present with an, I'm strong, I'm super strong. And if they have a perception that I don't take breaks or that I don't take vacations, I take breaks in my own way. I recharge my batteries when they need to be recharged. So, that's the reason why I think HR, IR, laws, policies, those things are set around vacation times for people. So it's important that we require them to take that. Also, from a corporate point of view, allowing somebody to build up too much vacation becomes a liability. So I'll leave that one with you to consider, of course. The next lesson that I've learned, number 7, is come back to basics every day. Practice, practice, practice. There's a reason why military organizations drill people over and over and over again, so that their behavioral responses become innate. It is reflex for them now, and not something that they have to think about. And that's an extreme case, but that ability as a leader for me, but also to require of people that I'm working with, come back to basics. There's a reason why musicians and pianists do scales every day, to keep those things under their belt. All right, number 8 for me is don't get hooked into following any one guru in the leadership space. And I'm going to steal from an ex-partner of mine, and she had an expression that I think is really apt, and she used to call it the game of spin the guru, right? And that is reading a book or going to a seminar with a person who truly is an expert in the leadership field and reading their books. That's great, but that recipe worked for that individual. And just because their recipe worked for them doesn't mean that their entire and specific recipe is going to work for everyone else on the planet. I've implemented a bunch of things that I've learned from leadership gurus across the years, and worked out that some things fit for me, some things really didn't fit. So I guess I'm more of a throw the kitchen sink at it, experiment with everything, and what works out for you is what you need to discover. Finally, my last tip, number 9, is the journey into discovering my own ego. I've discovered over the years that my ego is both my best friend and also my worst enemy. As a young leader, naive and inexperienced, I probably wasn't very aware, in fact, not probably, I know I wasn't aware of the impact and the influence of my own ego. And I made a lot of really dumb decisions, a lot of really big, ugly mistakes that had I been able to ask myself ego-checking questions and understanding, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I thinking what I'm thinking? Why do I feel what I feel? Why do I want what I want? A lot of the things that I was doing was driven out of absolute pure ego, and I still haven't entirely conquered that. And on the good side, my very healthy, I suppose you could call it large ego, has enabled me to have the success that I have. It's given me the ability to step into courageous acts that others might not be able to because their ego is not quite so healthy, not quite so strong. On the dark side of that, though, the shadow of ego is that it has me sometimes thinking that I'm the only one who can do something, or there's nobody who can do it better or as good as I do. And that leads me to making some pretty dumb decisions, some costly, time-expensive, financially expensive decisions, and doing some things that, as I look back, not exactly proud of. So that's probably, in fact, my very best piece of advice for new leaders. Find ways to learn about your own ego and to learn to challenge your own ego. Then make decisions and take actions. I hope you find that useful and look forward to seeing you in whatever space we catch up next.